Hey, welcome back, everybody. Oh man, is this going to be a fun interview? Oh, I think all my interviews are fun, but today my guest is MJ Callaway, and MJ has got a story and a half that she's going to share with us, and she has a book that she published, came out right after the pandemic hit, and the name of the book is Bounce Up: Outpower Adversity, Boost Resilience, and Rebound Higher. So, MJ, first and foremost, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to spend some time with me.
Thank you so much for having me, Peter. It is a delight to be on your show. I've listened to some of your podcasts, so I'm happy to be here.
Oh, thank you for being a listener. That's one step even higher. Yay. um, we met maybe about a year ago through NSA. You're over in the Pittsburgh chapter,
Right.
and I try. Dave Caperton and I came over, when Kelly Swanson was speaking,
Yes.
and that's where we met. And then you attended a couple of our events, and I was thinking about it because I do interview a lot of NSAers, and I said, well, let me look at NJ because I went, oh my, I saw the bounce back. Excuse, my fault. Bounce, oh, bounce up, and I went, oh, I got to have her on the podcast. So, what spurred? Because you've written another book, Self Success Roadmap.
Yes.
So, what spurred you to write Bounce Up?
Oh, a number of things. First, I mean, so many things. First, I wanted it to be a book that would inspire others so that anyone who is going through adversity, anybody who is going through a setback could believe in themselves that they could get through it. And I have several stories
Mhm.
that really could have taken me down a different path. It could have caused me to have a victim mentality instead of looking at it as a way to bounce up. And I
Mhm.
use that analogy because bounce back, if we say bounce back, think about this. It could take us right back to where we were before the adversity hit.
Right.
So think about the pandemic. Do we want to go back to March 14th, 2020?
No.
No way. And the same with me. One of my stories that I shared in the book is being a two-time cancer survivor. There isn't any way I want to go back to fall of 2016. I
Right.
learned so much more in those 4 years, not only personally, but professionally, because I realized my business was running me instead of me running my business.
Oh, that hurt. I can relate with that.
And it caused stress, which, I can't say that that's what caused the cancer, but
Right.
I am sure it didn't help it.
Right. Right. Exactly.
So think about this. I'll give you a great analogy that I like to share. Is that okay with you first?
Absolutely.
Okay, think about, have you ever bought or had one of those inflatable punching bags that have sand on the bottom? And it usually, at least in old school days, it had a clown on the front. Now there's lots of different pictures on
Right.
the front. You punched it and it bounced right back. It didn't go anywhere. It didn't move. It didn't grow. That's bounce back.
That's a great analogy.
It is. And whenever we get back to being on site, I actually take a punching bag on stage with me. Or when I am training on site, I take it with me, because the visual is so great.
Yeah, because that clown's will get punched again and punched again and punched again and punched again.
Exactly. And that's us because life hits us. And I love to use Rocky. Are you a Rocky fan? The Rocky movie, Rocky Balboa.
Oh, yo, Adrian. Yeah.
Yes. Well, and I believe it was Rocky Five, he has a lecture or talk or speech to his son. And he says, in their life is never, no one's ever going to hit you as hard as life hits you, which
Hmm.
is so true. And that clown, that punching bag is life hitting you.
Hmm.
So instead of thinking about bounce back, let's think about bounce up. And you played basketball, so I'd
Hmm.
love to share my basketball analogy. Does that sound good?
Absolutely.
So think about the basketball. In what position did you play, Peter?
Well, I was height challenged, so I was a guard.
Okay. So thinking about that, my son was a guard too. He's point guard because he was a little guy. But
Yeah.
think about the guys who are under the hoop. They're in the
Mhm,
paint. They are ready to get that rebound.
mhm.
And the person who jumps higher, the player who jumps higher than everybody else on that court. And I like to think about Wilt Chamberlain because he is the most rebounds and probably, at least in our lifetime, no one will ever catch him because it's thousands. He's ahead by thousands.
Right.
He grabs that ball, he brings it down. Now he has control of the ball, the next play, and depending upon where the team is with the game, he's control of the game too. So taking control, it doesn't matter what happens in life, we have control over how we respond.
Wow, I love the analogy. That's great. And we a lot of people do take a victim role.
Yes,
Why is this happening to me versus I have control over my decision. I have control over this. I want to take control of the situation. And you know, I was diagnosed at the ripe old age of 40 something as a type 1 diabetic, which seems strange, but it's really not as strange as one thinks. And I just went, okay. And somebody said, well, are you devastated? What? It's not pancreatic cancer. It's diabetes. It can be managed. Just have to manage it, and just kind of
right.
take that bounce up mentality.
Yes, exactly. And you had steps to take, you had action to take because the other part, some people might stay stuck. You didn't, you had taken control.
Absolutely. And I think about the pandemic when it hit. I think a lot of people got stuck and didn't shift, adapt, change the business model, put new things in because they thought it was going to end sooner than it has. And by the time they decided they need to do something, I think some may have waited too long.
Yes.
Versus, and the thing is, to your point, I don't want to go back, but I wrote a recent article that along the same lines about change. I don't want to go back to the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I don't want to go back when the World Wide Web was an internet service and download speeds were like -1. And cars didn't have safety systems in them. I don't want to go back to that way of life. I want to be here and working forward.
Right. Oh my goodness. Think about it. Back in the day, dial up, and you just sit and wait, and you're listening to that dial tone. No, I mean, we have information at the speed of lightning, which is awesome.
Right. I hear a lot of some of my friends go, God, I wish we'd just go back. Do you remember sniffing mimeograph paper in elementary school? How we used to make copies? Oh,
No.
thanks for the reminiscing, but no, I don't want to go back to those days. It may have been simpler, but this is called progress, and things keep bouncing up, moving forward, not getting stuck in a spot.
Right.
So I do have a question because as I was reading your bio, certified sales professional. There's a story there.
Yes. Uh, I ended up in sales, and I know you consider yourself an accidental accountant. I
Yeah.
would say I am an accidental sales professional.
Yeah.
I originally went to school for fashion merchandising,
Oh,
and
really?
yes, and then realized it really wasn't what I wanted to do. So I switched to business administration. And then when I had gotten out of school, the jobs that were open were in sales. So I'd taken a job. Actually, I had taken a job with a fitness center because I
Hmm.
thought it was about fitness. And I was a cheerleader whenever I was in high school. And I thought, oh, this fits right with what I'm doing, what
Hmm.
I've always done. And I realized it wasn't about fitness, it was about sales. So I ended up in a sales position. And it seemed like that's what my journey was, one sales position after another. But I will say when I really thought about going back and how we dig into our stories, the story about sales really goes back to when I was a child. My mother and my aunt were making these swans out of coat hangers, the wired coat hangers
Hmm.
and tulle, nylon tulle. And they were swans. And they made them in different colors, and it would go on like the back of the toilet tank or in the bathroom somewhere on a shelf. And I was going door to door selling these for them. And for everyone I sold, I got a quarter. Well, I was really into selling those. And it's so funny because when I think about it, and a neighbor would say, "Oh no, I don't need it." And I say, "Oh, but you can use it." And I would give them ideas of how to use it. And I sold a lot of those nylon tool swans, which
Hmm.
is so funny. I wish I had a picture of them now that I could post on my website.
But I think about your book, Bounce Up, and a certified sales professional. In sales, you hear a lot of no, right?
Yeah.
No,
Yes.
don't need it. Don't need it. There's a lot of rejection in being selling, and to have the perseverance and the ability to bounce up, not bounce back, and keep moving forward. I see that as another piece that went into your book is as a sales professional, if you're not bouncing up, you're bouncing into a new job.
Yes. Absolutely. And Peter, I've been in not only sales, but I also have a background in publishing. So as a freelance writer, I have more than 2,000 articles that have been published. It's another industry that is all about rejections. If
Mm.
you've ever heard the story from authors saying, "I have more rejections I could post, I could wallpaper my office with them." So, with sales and with publishing, I was accustomed to rejections. So you just blow it off and you say next. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
we weren't a great fit, but that's okay. And when I think about, I have back in 2004 and 2006, I had two books that were published by Warner Books,
Okay.
and it's under a pen name. And those two books, the manuscript was held by McGraw-Hill first. And
Hmm.
McGraw-Hill actually said no, held it for 5 months, the manuscript. And afterwards, I will say, at first devastated. And one of the things that they said was I didn't have enough of a platform, my co author and I. So it was like, okay, how do we get a platform? So taking that step. But I looked at it as McGraw Hill wasn't the right fit. And when the contract came around for Warner Books, it was a perfect fit. So even though we might get that rejection, it's
Hmm.
because it wasn't right at that time.
But we tend to take that rejection personally.
We do. And that is what catches us up. And I will tell you, I've had rejections from, especially my last corporate position. I had rejections at first,
Mhm.
no, no, no. And then there were times where I would just keep reaching out to them. And 2 years later, that person who said
Mhm.
no came back. Or someone who said no referred friends to me. So that no can lead you to other places.
That's great advice, and that's something I will take your advice on. I enjoy building relationships, and sales has always been a challenge for me. But I do work on it and try to improve it all the time. But nobody's ever kind of put it that way that I will I will keep that piece. I'm taking that piece of advice and going to run with it.
Good. Because anybody who has said no, your next step is, can we still keep in touch?
Right.
May I add you to my list? I understand. I also, with that, if you get a no, I want to find out why I got the no.
Right.
That's something that I had always, made sure I asked, what is it that had you making that decision? I never use why did you make that decision?
Mhm.
What caused that decision? What could I do better? To see if it was me. Every time I did get a no, and I still do this, I
Mhm.
evaluate. Okay, how could I make it better next time? What can I do differently? And then finding out from that other person, that potential buyer, what did they want that I didn't have or say I had? Because sometimes it's miscommunication.
As you're telling the story, about fall last year, um, I was approaching a CPA firm here in Ohio with a new product that I was offering, and I thought I had all my bases covered. I thought I could answer everything, so- and I luckily I knew these guys, and I could see that this whole process was going south rather quickly. And I said, "Okay, guys, stop." Uh, Clearly, I thought I was prepared. I was not. I love the questions that you've asked. I didn't think about that aspect. Help me here. What didn't I anticipate? And I just sat
Mhm.
there and shut up and just listened to him. Didn't take anything personally. And then I said, thank you. I'll be back. I'll be back. But I need to take your advice and make sure that I know the answers to those questions.
That is saving the sale.
Mhm,
That is the part of saving the sale. And noticing either the body language or the change in tone of voice,
mhm,
and then being aware of it so you can take a step back and say, I believe I miscommunicated here.
mhm,
What have I missed?
mhm,
And you did it with saying, help me here,
mhm,
taking that step back. Another little component that you can use, a little tidbit for you,
mhm,
is asking before you get to the ask, is asking the person, how do you see me helping you?
mhm, mhm.
Because you want them to say out loud how they see you helping them.
Yeah.
Because if they can't voice it out loud, you don't have the sale. So
Right.
there isn't any sense you asking. So you have to go back to the discovery, go back to asking those questions. You missed something along the line.
Right. And the beauty of it is we're all human. We all make mistakes. We all fail. Yeah, you're going to beat yourself up a little bit over it, but get over it, move, bounce up, and move forward.
Yes, it's always about taking that next step, moving. And sometimes in sales, it isn't about getting the contract during that conversation.
Hmm.
It's about setting up another meeting. It's about building that relationship.
Absolutely.
Uh, and which is really important right now during, well, COVID and post COVID,
Mm,
because I say it's the trust meter. Our buyer's trust meter is broken, and if you don't want to think about being broken, it has hit an all-time low. And it's because of everything that has happened within the last year.
mhm.
So buyers aren't sure who they can trust. In sales, if we start to sound like we're manipulating, it's going to put up such a red flag. So it's going back to giving that value, building that relationship, and not pushing.
It's interesting you say that because when the pandemic hit, the NSA community, and that's the National Speakers Association, the people that talk, not those who listen, as the old joke goes. There was like a fraction of the membership that said, no, we got to push hard during this time.
No.
And there was another bigger fraction that said, I am not going to ask for money. How can I serve my
Yes.
clients, my potential prospects, and not ask for any money, but just be there to help? And I think personally that was the smarter approach for the long term.
Agree with you 100%. And it's also who you are, your mission, your vision,
Mhm,
and what's authentic to you. I created numerous tip sheets, like an
mhm,
infographic
mhm,
that I gave out to anybody who wanted it. It's here. I created a sales toolkit. Let me get that out. A sales toolkit that I gave for free to chamber members or anybody on my list who needed it or wanted it. That felt good to me. For
mhm.
me to be pounding the pavement and pushing to say, hire me, that didn't feel good.
Right. And the one thing I did recognize when the pandemic hit and everybody was shoved home, and now we've got to deal with a platform, whether it's Zoom or whatever, 99% of the people had no clue. So I went to the Ohio Society of Association Execs, told the executive director, if anybody needs any help with any of this stuff, call me. I'll be happy to help them. I'll be happy to host it for them. I'll be happy to do whatever they need. I'd be happy to do. And at no charge. She goes, what? I said, yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
Because, and even with my wife's work, I was going to be, there was the one aspect of, should I really be hosting their board meetings and being privy to the conversations? No, which led a lot of them say, well, we're going to go and get a Zoom subscription, but we want to use you as a resource. Perfect.
Mhm. Yes. I have offered a couple of organizations that I'm in that if they didn't have a higher level of Zoom, that
Hmm.
I would be happy to host them on mine, and I would be like the back end tech for them. So, like you, given that value, and it feels good.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, yeah, the cash flow didn't look that great, but you know what? I when it hit and I saw gigs dying off on me. Luckily, I had some backup cash flow that I could rely on, and just went.
Yeah.
As someone told me, and I'm using this in my email signature line: be positive, test negative.
Love it.
Yeah,
Love it.
just make. I know just, and I'm getting so frustrated. Is not the word, but I think there's a little bit to Zoom fatigue, but I think people are taking a little bit too far. And some of the lowest me, it's like, you know what? It's happened. We have to deal with it. So if we take a
Right.
positive attitude and embrace it versus like that Geico commercial, don't be like your parents.
Yes.
Okay, hey,
Yes.
who wants to open the PDL? Oh God, not me. No, don't, not me. Just embrace it, learn it. It's frustrating. Everything new takes time, but just go with the right attitude and to your book, bounce up. Don't bounce back.
And you've said it, it's attitude. So I have a colleague, an NSA colleague, who said during a conversation, I don't want to do this. I want to go back to where we were before this happened. I want to be able to get on a plane. I want to do 20 keynotes in a month. Okay. Well, we're not there. So we can't do that right now. So what are you going to do instead? Being
I go ahead.
stuck.
Yeah, I think we get stuck because we're focusing on things that we have no control over.
Right.
And to your point, and I think your book brings it up, you focus on things that you have control over, not the things you don't have control.
Exactly. And it's stuck in the problem instead
Mhm.
of thinking about the solution. And the easiest way to go from problem to solution, because problem is we're being reactive and we're
Mhm.
making comments and we're making statements. When we switch to a question, we switch into solution. And I'll give you a personal example. So back when I was first diagnosed,
Mhm.
and I'm going to use this because everything that happens to us personally impacts us professionally. So
Absolutely.
when I was first diagnosed, I had a 20% chance of surviving if chemo didn't work, and chemo had a 50% chance of working. So I had a choice. I could whine and cry and everything else. And I will say I did cry,
Mhm.
but I also needed to make some changes in my lifestyle. So when I had, and I called chemo magic wand, that was one of my first steps. Because anytime I talked about the breast cancer or the treatment to my kids, I could just see like the wind taken out of their sails,
Mhm.
and they're millennials. And I didn't want every time they looked at me for them to think of it. So I created fun names. I created, instead of chemo, it was magic wand because I believed it was going to reduce that
Mhm.
tumor. For radiation, because I had radiation too,
Mhm.
I called the machine Buzz because Buzz Lightyear's so much fun. And when you think about Buzz, you think about fun. So I did that with everything, even the IV, which I was attached to for 7 hours. I called my boyfriend because my boyfriend was going with me everywhere. So, and look, Peter, I have you laughing. And that's what I wanted to do. But it was a way to show anybody, my clients, my kids, that you can flip a situation. I call it flip it. You can flip anything.
Oh my
So,
God. You're
I
laughing so
have
hard, I'm
tears.
crying. Oh my gosh.
Oh, here's another one. I refuse to let the doctors call me a patient. They had to call me a guest. Okay, I will say I annoyed them, but they knew me so well. I went to every single appointment dressed as if I were going on a business appointment. And that was a date with my future self. I used Flip It.
Uh-huh.
So during when I was going through treatment, they did tell me that more than likely you will land in the hospital a few times
Mhm,
because the intense magic wand we're giving you, we don't give it to most people because they wouldn't make it.
mhm,
And it means exactly what you might think it means.
mhm,
So during that time, they said you have to exercise, you want to get it through. But it was during flu season. I was told not to go to the gym because my immune system tanked. However, we have a beautiful conservatory here, Phipps Conservatory and Botanical Gardens. I joined, a
mhm,
membership, a year-long membership. So I would go there to walk so that I was helping push everything out. Plus, it's gorgeous. It brought peace of mind to me. So it goes back to one of your favorite words, improvise.
mhm.
Improvise. What can you do right now with what you have? And the people that got unstuck or moved through the pandemic positively are the ones who improvised. They used whatever they had
Mhm.
right now to make it happen.
MJ, your attitude is just so wonderful, and as you were telling the story about your treatment and your boyfriend that goes with you everywhere, I flash back to the forward of your book, um, and the woman who did the forward was talking about your treatment and basically talking about your attitude, and when she wrote that when you lost your hair it didn't shake you because but you would come in and to your mastermind group and you'd be styling a new wig. And
Yes.
I do believe she said even one wig was purple.
So I had not quite purple, but I had because I couldn't quite do that, but I had extensions,
Mm,
and then I had hats that went with them. So it was the oncologist said, "MJ, you're styling again. There
mhm,
you are, MJ, styling again." So I transitioned into it. I knew that I was going to lose my hair. And
mhm,
before I did so, what I did so wasn't a major shock. In
mhm,
fact, Peter, none of my clients, and I worked the entire time through, none of my clients knew that I had been diagnosed with cancer. I'd like to say cancer visited me.
okay,
Nobody knew. What I did was I started to wear some fashion hats
mhm,
so that when I went from having to wear the
mhm,
wig was underneath, and I called it my new hair.
mhm,
My new hair was underneath with a hat on top. And then after people got used to that, unfortunately it was winter, then I got rid of the hats, and
mhm,
then I just had my new hair.
mhm. That's a great story, and she also writes in the forward that she had a friend or colleague going through pretty much the same thing that you were going through, but
Yes.
the colleague took the opposite approach and stayed in the house, had this doom and gloom attitude about herself. And I think uh, the woman who wrote the forward even tried to get you to talk to her, and she wouldn't even talk to you.
Renee Thompson is who wrote the foreword, and she is the CEO and founder of Healthy Workforce Institute. So she sees a lot of attitudes. Her subject is on bullying, so she really sees it. But exactly, she had a friend who was in the same exact position and took the opposite approach. And it was so sad that she did not reach out. Several of my doctors did ask if some of their other guests could reach out to me, and I said absolutely. My chiropractor, I don't know how many times she gave out my name.
Mm,
And I did take every possible treatment. Like I did acupuncture and I did aromatherapy, I did Reiki. whatever I could do in addition to your traditional treatment, I included it because who knew what could work?
Right. Um, it's it's amazing what attitude does.
Yes.
It is absolutely amazing what a healthy, positive attitude can do. And I think you were obviously you were thinking about yourself, but you were also I'm surmising that you were also thinking about the people that were around you.
Yes.
You were thinking not just solely about you, but you were thinking about yourself, but also your kids, your client, everybody who interacted with you. You were thinking about them too.
Absolutely. Peter, one of the things that I do in addition to sales, and there's so much more to sales, and you talk about change your mindset,
Mm,
and mindset plays such a huge part in sales. And when I train or when I talk to sales teams or during conferences, I cover mindset because we need mindset in order to get results.
mhm.
So, with it, if I could not handle my own adversity, how the heck could I go into a sales team or a company and say, well, don't follow what I did, but listen to me? No, I had to be a role model. And I know some of my backstory of when I
Mhm,
started over 11
mhm,
years ago. I need to be a good role model for my children because unfortunately, my former spouse is not because of an addiction. So I need to show them that life is going to be hard. Like Rocky says,
mhm.
life is going to hit you harder than anything else. And we need to be able to bounce up. And I needed to show them that. And you mentioned rejections. How
Mhm.
could I go into a sales team and say, blow off that rejection if I couldn't rebound?
Mhm.
Okay, I'm a little passionate about it.
No, no, I love that. But when you said that, I just reflected back to a story about my son. When he asked this girl out for the first time and got shot down, he was so bummed about it. And I just said, "Did she say why?" He went, "No." I said, "Well, okay. Is there only one girl in your school? No. Is there anybody else you might?" And I said, "Well, go back and think about what you did before. Try something different." So he came home, about a week later, and he got rejected again, and got rejected again. Then he came home one day. She said yes, and he had this. He felt really proud. He felt really good about himself. And I went, okay, good. Bring it back down a little bit. Just because you got the date, don't get overly cocky there, my friend.
Right.
Bring it back and take that level approach. But when you were talking about that rejection, that story just popped into my head. At one point, I think he thought he was like Don Juan of the middle school.
And in sales, we do have those highs. I went from, so in my last corporate position, I had taken a commission based position, which is kind of crazy when you think about where I was at that point.
Right.
I left a 20-some year marriage. I had $500 to my name. I left a house. I didn't even have a bed at that time. And I needed to leave because my safety was threatened.
Mhm.
So with it, but I knew that I had belief in myself. And I knew that sales was the one area that I could really show what I could do. And if I worked really, really hard, I could make more money. Because prior to that, I was in a salaried sales position
Mhm.
for a nonprofit, which I didn't make a lot of money. So going into and I will say it was in an industry that I didn't know anything about. It was in the building industry. It was with a national builder that was building custom homes on your own lot. I didn't know about lot prep. I didn't know about city water versus, having to have, a sump pump or anything like that. In fact, I went through 3 interviews, and then the third interview, there were 3 gentlemen in the interview with me, and someone said, do you know what a header and footer is? And I said, yes. They didn't ask anymore. So they went on to the next question. Okay. I will tell you, a few weeks into that position, I was saying, MJ, what did you do? So I was at the bottom of the barrel at that point,
Yeah.
but I learned, I use what I like to say is I incorporated a power team. you know, I found people that could mentor me, that could answer questions, that could be an
Mhm.
accountability. And I went from being the bottom of the barrel to being a high producer, producing 3 times my sales quota. So through all that, but we do get into sales slumps as a sales professional or as a business owner. Really, anybody in business has some piece of sales.
Mhm.
So it's finding a way to turn it around, to flip it, is what I like to say.
Yeah, we're going to use that phrase in some of the social media posts that we're going to provide you, graphics. I like that flip it and the bounce up. And so you're in the building industry, and I'm sitting there trying. I'm imagining this whole interview process, and I know why they hired you because of your attitude. I mean, you have not you smile all the time, which is I love, and I wish more people would. But you've just got this genuine smile, this genuine attitude. You're very authentic, and yes, you are a motivational speaker. There's some motivational speakers that can't hold a candle to your motivation.
Oh, thank you. Ooh,
Wow. I mean,
thank you.
you've I do research on my guests, and I'm always yeah I can't go into depth, but during the interview, a lot comes out, and uh, yeah, you've motivated me big time. You've inspired me to look at sales from a different perspective. I've always been good at taking understanding adversity, accepting adversity,
Mhm.
and changing that mindset. But there's always been that kryptonite, and it's not going to be kryptonite anymore, thanks to you.
Good. And it is thinking about it. And I think this is what had me successful in an industry that I didn't know anything about, that I learned from the ground up. And I was thinking about that other person. My very first client. So I started on a Friday, and on Saturday I had my very first client. And he came in, he knew which model. And get this, I worked out of a storefront. So I am selling out of a storefront next to a Panera Bread. I didn't even have a custom home. So fortunately, I was really good at creating descriptions. So he ended up buying a house from me, not that day, but
Mhm.
6 months later. And I was finding out about him. I knew so much about my clients.
Mhm.
I mean, and I'll give an example. One couple had 4 children under the age of 8. She homeschooled, she also canned, and he worked from home. 3 boys, and the littlest was a girl. They were going to build a house that was like 1,800 square feet. And I'm looking at this house, and I knew it didn't have enough space for them. And I said to her, Jen, this house will fit you now. But think about this, in 5 years, your boys are going to be teens and tweens. They're going to have friends over, they'll have sports equipment. Where will you put it?
Mhm.
Ended up putting them in the best house for them, but
Mhm.
looking at them as what is best for them. I knew I could lose the sale,
Mhm.
because they were going into a higher bracket model,
Right, right.
or they could go elsewhere and have someone tell them what they wanted to hear.
Mhm.
But I had their best interest. And one more other story where having someone's best interest comes into play. There was this young couple that came in, and he really wanted to buy a house. And so think about this. You have to buy land, you have to get your land prepped, which could be anywhere between 20 and 50,000 or more, plus the house.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of components to it. And I knew, looking at where they were in the way of their pre-approval and where they wanted to build, thinking about the taxes, thinking about the land prep, thinking about how much land costs. And I said to them, please go home and whether it's your parents or an uncle or an older sibling, have them look at your finances. Have them look at this quote that I'm giving you that is only on the house before you jump into this project.
Mhm.
A week later, I got a call and he said, MJ, thank you, because we can't afford it. And I looked at him as, how would I want someone to treat my son or my daughter? And I would not want someone to treat my daughter, push the sale through and have them lose the house. But you know what came out of that, Peter? 3 recommendations, 3 referrals from friends of theirs who ended up, I built a house for them.
That's a great story. Because I mean, salespeople do get a bad rap, but
Yes,
there's a stereotype out there. And there's some who have done the sale, got their commission, called it a day, they're happy. But as I said earlier, you don't think about yourself. You do, but you think about who you're interacting with. You think about that audience. You think about that client. Those people are coming in, and what's best for them, not what's best for you.
right,
And
right.
that goes a long way in building strong relationships and getting great referrals.
Yes. And you know what? I will say I am grateful and blessed to have had that empathy. Um, I can't really, I feel it's something that it's a trait, it's a
Mm,
strength
mhm.
that I had, that I've developed, but I had a piece of that. Not everybody has a piece of that. So they really have to build that trait. So I'll say I was fortunate that I just had it blossom.
It's funny you should use the word empathy because I'm writing a article right now on empathy for my podcast, and I start off by talking about this book called "Humans Are Underrated." Jeff Colvin, who was the former editor of Fortune magazine, where he writes, "Those successful leaders in the future will be those who can empathize."
Mhm.
And guys, women empathize better than you. Period. You better learn because men are not the best empathizers at all. Luckily, improv has taught me how to empathize, and
Mhm.
it's a critical skill that's needed. But I mean, just that in itself, the ability to empathize with the other person and help them figure out what's best for them.
And with it, I will say people that can be empathetic are people who are more resilient because they can look at the bigger picture. They're not focused on themselves, they're focusing on the company or the team or others. They're more resilient. They are not focused on them.
Yeah,
And you can tell when a change happens, when change happens within a company and you're telling the team about it or you're sharing it with the team, you can look around and see the difference in body language. And then the first statements, oh my goodness, this is going to cost me so much work, or I can't believe we're going through this, or, rather than, oh, this is going to help us down the line. Oh, new software. That's awesome. Oh, I'm not going to have to go through 15 steps. We're moving down to 5. And that's where people who can empathize, who are more empathetic, are usually more resilient.
Mhm. Yes, I agree. I agree with that. And the word that I used in this article is those who are self-absorbed create chaos, confusion, destruction, versus those who empathize, who creates an environment, who creates a culture, who empowers people to do things, not micromanage them. And there's examples of that all around. But as I wrap up, and I used to do this, and I thought about it the other day. I used to ask my guests, I put them through this litany of questions, these rapid fire questions, just to kind of get to know a little bit better. And, you know, um, but I started asking people, well, I'm going to start asking people, what's a fun fact about you that I don't know, or maybe a lot of people who know you don't know? What's that fun fact about you, other than your wonderful smile?
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
The I probably don't look like I can be a risk taker or someone who likes to take adventures.
Uh-oh.
And So a fun fact, I'll share two.
Okay.
One, I zip lined over gators in Alabama. So I had taken a zip line course. It was actually 7 towers. And once you got past the first tower, you could not back out. You were in for the ride or the next 7 rides.
Mm,
And it was actually over gators,
mhm,
which is pretty awesome. Like, I love to talk about that.
mm,
And I will say, when I went through the second one, because the gators were over the second zip,
mm,
and I'm looking down, I did wish I had my camera, but I was
mm.
afraid to take my camera because it was a zip line where it didn't stop you. You actually had to control it. You had these heavy leather gloves on that had steel plate here, and you had to grab the line. You couldn't grab it completely because it would throw you backwards, but you had to like just slow yourself
Wow.
down with it. Yes.
Wow.
And then the other fun fact is, when I was in UP Michigan, Upper Peninsula
Yeah.
Michigan, I toured a black bear rescue or black bear reserve, something like that.
Mm.
And I got to go inside of an area with baby black bears. And there was one baby black bear who would not leave me alone. He was so darn cute. He was also pretty big. But I had a backpack on and he wanted something in my backpack. I'm not sure what it was. We were actually playing tug of war with my backpack. And I thought, because I was actually on a media trip at the time, and that backpack was, I didn't take a handbag.
Mm.
So I needed it. It had everything in it that I needed for the next week. I was like, you cannot have it. You cannot tear it apart. I need it. So those are two kind of fun facts.
Wow. Yeah. You said you see you as a risk taker, and I went, I kind of do because of the attitude. I think, yeah, let's try it. Why not? As long as it's safe or whatever. But then but you made friends with a blackberry. Not everybody can say that.
Right. Because another one I say is I biked down a volcano in Maui, but I think people can say that, they bike down. So, I've done a few other things, but those are probably the most interesting.
Well, MJ, this has been an absolute pleasure interviewing you. I've learned so much. You've motivated me. I know you're going to motivate my audience. Thank you so very much for your time. And I look forward to when our paths cross, preferably not in Zoom again. But if that's the case, I'm always up for it. I'm always up for a conversation. But I look forward to seeing you in person when we can get back to some sort of normalcy.
Peter, this has been such a delight, and I cannot wait until we can sit down and maybe have a cocktail or two.
Oh, twist my arm, please. Thank you so very much, MJ.